Greetings, and welcome back to yet another analysis from the Skilling Open. Today on the table we got Jan-Krzyszto Duda against Teimour Radjabov. And boy, the latter, Radjabov, he is on a roll. He's on a 3-game winning streak. 3 wins in a row here. 3 out of 3 today so far. An absolute dream day. And boy, the games have been incredible. There are no other words to describe it. His games have been they've been a joy to watch, and I can't wait to show you guys this game against the Polish Duda here. So let's begin with knight of 3, knight of 6, g3. A very common start here, a very calm start here from Jan-Krzyszto Duda. With g3, fairly solid. He's not interested in a dynamic fight. b3, and bishop g7, bishop b2. Everything is fairly standard so far. Not the most common opening, but believe it or not, this is played quite a bit. It's a strategic, rich opening, which is sometimes very obnoxious for black to play. I played this quite a lot with black, and it's not so simple. Here the most common approach is d5, bishop g2, castles, c6 and c4. This position is played a lot, and it's not actually more dangerous than it seems, and fairly critical. But Radjabov, he goes for a different approach, c5. The chances of this game transposing into a weird English is very possible. Now that the pawn is on a c5, bishop g2, d6. Different approach again from Radjabov. He can obviously play d5, and here the game will be completely different. It's just a matter of taste, really. d6, castles, e5, and the point here is that black gets a great grip on the d4 square, but the only downside is that it could be weakening the d5 square quite a bit. But with the bishop on b2, it's not so easy to exploit that. Normally in the English opening, especially in these positions, you put your bishop on g5 and then you take on f6 and then play knight d2, followed by knight d5, knight e4. But this is a very different move order, so e5 is better here, I'd say. c4, castles, knight c3. Knight c6. Everything is fairly logical so far. I do have to admit that I do like. I think black has gotten a nice position. I don't think he has any problems. d3 from Duda and h6. The point of this move is that black wants to prevent knight g5. So now if Radjabov had played bishop e6, he always needs to watch out for knight g5, which is slightly annoying, because now we can jump to e4 with a tempo. So Radjabov wants to avoid that. He plays h6, and then Duda jumps to d2. Same plan, he wants to play knight e4 at some point, or even knight e5. Bishop e6, rook c1, and queen d7 from Radjabov. Maybe he can potentially play bishop h3 and exchange these two bishops. The bishop on g2 is known as strength in these positions, so it's an advantage to trade them off, but it's easier said than done. a3, it's still possible to play bishop h3. I can't see anything wrong with it, so I'm sure it was a possibility, but Radjabov went for rook c8, which is another logical move. Duda would like to play b4 here, which could maybe be possible in this position. At least it seems to me like an interesting sacrifice to maybe play queen b3 or even bishop a3 here and then knight b5 to attack on d6. Looks fairly interesting. I'm not sure if it works, but the computer doesn't hate it, so then it can't be too bad. It's always an interesting option, and that's White's plan here. So in order to advance his position, White needs to play b4, b5 at some point. So b4 is a natural try, at least. But knight d5 is another very logical move. b6 from Radjabov. Here I would say that b4 again is very possible, and then play b5 next, or queen a4. Maybe even take on c5 in some lines. But yeah, I would say b4 is logical, but Duda goes for bishop c3. I'm not sure if I like that move that much, but I think he also plans to put his bishop on d2 in the near future, because the bishop is not really doing that well on b2 due to the fact that this pawn is blocking the diagonal. Bishop g4 came, kind of prophylactic move. He wants to prevent white from playing e3, and then in the future put his knight on d4. Knight takes f6, bishop takes f6, knight e4, and bishop g7. And here you can see a disadvantage with the bishop on c3, because black can now play f5, and the knight has to go back to d2. And he would rather put his knight on c3, but this is what we see happen though. Bishop d2, f5, knight c3. But I think this is quite comfortable for black, and the attack is certainly a little bit unpleasant for white. I would prefer black here, although the position is roughly equal. I'm gonna guess, but the attack goes on. f4, bishop d5 check, king h8, and then Duda plays f3. It's a move you do not want to make, but it's an important move. It's a defending move, and now it's not so simple for black to get through. So rook bishop h3, rook f2, knight e7, bishop e4. You do not want to let black take that bishop. Knight f5, g takes f4, e takes f4, bishop takes f4, bishop d4. The position is now becoming wild. It's very complicated. I would be very scared here if I was white. But the position is once again roughly equal. And if the position is roughly equal, I would prefer white for sure. But knight d5, let's see what happens. Radjabov goes for queen g7, which is actually not a very good move. And we're gonna see why in a second. I can quickly mention that g5 probably would have been a better try, just to play this as soon as possible. And after, for example, bishop d2, you can start playing g4, and now the position, you're opening up around white's king, and this is extremely dangerous. Do keep in mind that taking the exchange wouldn't be dangerous at all. Most of the attack is gone, and we have white has a pawn, and these two bishops are very strong, so white would be much better in a scenario like that. But queen g7 was played, bishop d2. This is a very good move, and the point is that after g5 we can now play e3. This is a very good move. g4. The attack keeps going. The position is extremely complex, but Duda has a move here which is very strong, and that is the logical move king h1, move out of the diagonal. Although when you play king h1, you need to calculate what happens after g3, and this is not so simple, because the only move here is to calmly play rook e2, and if that's the only move, it's not easy to make that move over the board. I can mention, however, that if you take, you're lost after knight takes, king h2, and then something like rook g8. The threat is knight f1 followed by mate, and it's very hard to prevent. Also queen g5, queen h4 is in the air. So rook e2 would have been the only move, and then something like g takes h2, e takes d4, knight g3 check, king h2, knight takes e4. You should probably save with queen g1, try to trade the queens, and here it would probably lead to a draw after rook takes f3. So certainly some play left, but this is fairly equal. A forced sequence right there, which is extremely difficult to evaluate as white, especially if you're low on time and playing a short game, as we're doing it here. But Duda, he went for f takes g4, bishop takes g4, queen e1, and queen e1 is the losing move in this position. There are a few moves here that could save the game. The best one would be rook g2, and we have a forced sequence of bishop takes d1, rook takes g7, bishop takes g7, and rook takes d1. This position here is also roughly equal. So that was Duda's best try. He could maybe play bishop queen f1 too, but when you're under attack, you want to trade off the queens as soon as possible. So that's why rook g2 is probably a better move. But queen e1 was played, and here comes the great combination of bishop f3 check, king f1, and then knight h4. This is the killer move, and it's just all too dangerous for the white king, and there is nothing you can do. Duda try e takes d4. Radjabov played bishop g2, and after one important point is it's actually very nice. After bishop takes g2, we can simply capture back with queen takes g2. Now we're going to have queen g4. Very important move. Do not let the king escape to d1. And after king f1 and rook e8, this position is lost. Maybe bishop e3, but something like c takes d4 here looks killing. Taking the piece next. So king e2 was tried, but after queen g4, king e3, and bishop takes e4, bishop c3, and then knight g2. Queen h3 would have been checkmate, just to point that out. But a knight g2 is good enough nonetheless. King d2, knight takes c1, d takes c5 check, king g8, and Duda resigned. So a very nice attacking game from Radjabov. Nicely defended by Duda as well. We have to hand it to him. It was a very difficult position to defend, and he did find a lot of good moves, but very often when you're under attack, you need to find the absolute best moves, and you need to play the best moves all along the way, not just a few moves. And this is, in practice, very difficult when you're low on time and you're under attack. There's so much to calculate. So hats off to Radjabov for a nice dynamic victory, and the man is on a roll, that's for sure. Incredibly impressive by Radjabov, who now has 3 out of 3 points so far today. Stay tuned for more.